tonight we step into a place where the night air holds both warmth and crispness, where the limestone cliffs of Somaliland glow like muted lanterns beneath a thin moon, and where the first quiet rustle of early rising frankincense gatherers drifts toward you long before you realize you've wandered into their rhythm. You stand there, half dreaming, half shivering, staring at trees that look more like weathered sculptures than anything alive. A resin tear glints on one branch, and you're momentarily convinced it's staring back at you, judging your lack of wilderness credentials. And honestly, you probably won't survive this if an unexpected goat stampede happens, but let's just assume the goats are feeling generous tonight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, the rocky ground shifting beneath your sandals. Yes, you apparently chose sandals for this terrain, which is a bold choice, but we'll allow it. The air smells faintly citrusy, like someone whispered the idea of lemons into the wind and never followed up. Up on the ridge, the harvesters are already moving. You see one tap a boswellia tree, though tap is a gentle word for the small incision made with a traditional mingaf blade. The cut is slight, careful, just enough for the tree to respond with a droplet of pearly sap. That droplet will harden, deepen in color, and be collected in a few days. Oddly, it feels like watching someone coax a secret out of an old friend. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind: how the ancient Egyptians prized frankincense so much they recorded their punt expeditions on temple walls, showing ships loaded with resin jars and, strangely, some baboons who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. The desert around you is quiet now, but that sense of long trade routes and old ambitions lingers, like the last note of a cathedral chant. You adjust your stride and imagine sandalwood merchants, Roman sailors, and medieval monks all part of the same inhaled story. To your left, one of the harvesters waves you closer with the universal gesture of "come see this weird thing." You crouch beside him as he points to a knot on the branch. He mutters something about a tree spirit that complains if you cut too shallow or too deep. A fringe tidbit, perhaps, but he delivers it with such conviction you half expect the branch to start lecturing you about proper technique. You follow the resin gatherer along a ledge where the wind constantly tries to shove you just enough to remind you who's boss. The sun is not quite up, and the limestone cliffs hold pockets of night within their crevices. Each footstep sends small stones skittering downward, sounding like a tiny applause for your efforts. You take it as encouragement, though you suspect the stones are more entertained by your clumsy balance than your bravery. As you watch a second harvester work, he wipes sweat from his forehead even though the morning is still cool. His motions are precise, practiced. Each mingaf stroke must be consistent. Too much bark removed and the tree weakens. Too little and the resin yield is poor. Historians still argue whether ancient boswellia groves were cultivated more intensively than today or if they grew wild along these cliffs just as stubbornly back then. You glance at the gnarled trees hugging the slopes and feel like they could easily predate entire empires. The harvester lifts a hardened resin tear from a small woven pouch. It's pale, almost translucent, like a droplet of sunlight trapped mid-fall. You roll it between your fingers. Well, attempt to, because one grain slips and almost vanishes into the dirt. You catch it, barely. The harvester chuckles. There's your joke of the moment. You, valiantly protecting a resin pebble as if it's a priceless gem, while everyone else treats it like an everyday miracle. Around you, the morning begins to warm. A camel somewhere to your right lets out a sound that can only be described as a disgruntled gargoyle clearing its throat. You turn toward it. Big mistake. The wind instantly pushes frankincense dust right into your eyes. You blink dramatically, as if performing for an invisible audience, and wipe your face with your sleeve. A second joke drifts out of you. Congratulations, You've just invented the first desert aromatherapy face scrub, guaranteed to confuse dermatologists everywhere. As the sun peaks higher, the gatherers finish the first round of cuts for today. Most will return later to collect the hardened tears from the previous tapping cycle. You, however, are led toward a natural shelf in the rock where early workers rest and watch the golden light stretch across the plains. Someone hands you a goatskin water pouch. You sip, expecting some exotic flavor. But no, it's water. Perfectly ordinary water. Your third joke arrives naturally. The real mystical essence of the desert is apparently hydration, because after that one sip you suddenly feel like you could challenge a cactus to a staring contest. The group around you begins discussing today's yield prospects. You listen quietly, your ears filled with the scratch of sand shifting beneath their woven shoes. One worker lifts a resin tear toward the rising sun, analyzing its clarity. Clearer tears fetch higher prices. Another mentions a merchant arriving next week who prefers the rounder, lighter grains. You realize how many layers exist behind each grain of frankincense. The climate, the tree's health, the skill of the harvesters, and soon, the decisions of the sorters. You haven't reached the sorting process yet, but already the resin feels alive, complex, something owned rather than merely found. One elder harvests a knot of bark to show you where a tree has healed from previous cuts. He explains how the tree must rest between tapping cycles to stay healthy. You nod solemnly, pretending you understood all of this from the beginning. The elder smiles kindly, as if acknowledging that you're trying, and trying is appreciated, even when your sandals are questionable. You travel downward along a goat trail that zigzags like it's trying to confuse you on purpose. The earth becomes warmer beneath your feet, and the breeze carries more resin scent now. It's subtle, never overwhelming, but persistent, like a soft hum at the edge of your senses. Ahead, a cloth and branch structure appears, pitched low against the cliffside. A sorting shelter, though you'll step fully inside it later. For now, your journey pauses just outside, among the freshly gathered resin mounds waiting for hands far more practiced than yours to turn chaos into categories. The day has barely begun, but the story, the quiet skill, the steady patience, the delicate decisions, has already wrapped itself around you like a warm shawl. You duck into the woven palm shelter as if slipping into a pocket of cooler air carved out just for you. The structure is low, deliberately so. You have to bow your head to enter, which feels like a subtle nod of respect whether you intended it or not. Inside, the early light filters through thin slits in the palm fronds, casting striped shadows across the sand-packed floor. It looks a bit like the desert tried to design its own zebra and gave up halfway. Your eyes adjust slowly, revealing the reason you've been brought here. Mounds of frankincense resin in soft, uneven piles, each catching the light like frozen drops of honey. A sorter gestures for you to sit, though gestures might be generous. It's more of a silent head tilt, the universal desert sign for plant yourself here and try not to break anything. You comply, lowering yourself onto a woven mat that squeaks faintly under your weight. The shelter smells warm and earthy, the scent of dried palm fibers threading through the sharper aroma of resin. You rub your fingers together and feel a grainy coating already forming. Congratulations, you're becoming part of the workspace whether you meant to or not. As your eyes roam, you notice dozens of resin tears, some pale yellow, others milky white, and a few amber pieces that look like someone melted the sunset and let it drip. The sorters move their hands through the mounds with a casual precision that you can tell took years to perfect. One woman lifts a grain to her ear and taps it lightly with her fingernail, listening for the soft, brittle click that tells her the moisture is just right. That little click echoes faintly around the shelter, like tiny castanets played by the desert itself. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. Ancient Greek geographers once claimed frankincense was guarded by winged serpents. You glance around the shelter. No serpents, winged or otherwise. Just sorters and a particularly judgmental camel outside who appears to be glaring through the doorway. Maybe that's where the legend started. Someone mistook a camel's resting face for a threat and embellished the rest. A sorter pushes a mound toward you, encouraging you to try. You pick up a resin grain roughly the size of a pea, hold it up to the light, and nod as if you understand what you're doing. The woman beside you watches silently. You rotate the grain. She keeps watching. You purse your lips thoughtfully. She still watches. Finally, she takes the grain back with a gentle smile that says, "Good effort, but please don't sabotage our entire economy." She sorts the grains with movements so small they're almost meditative, flicking lighter pieces out of the main pile, selecting the clearest ones, nudging the dusty fragments into a separate corner. Each category has a future destination: perfumers in Europe, incense burners in the Gulf, herbalists in India. You suddenly realize your attempt at sorting was roughly equivalent to giving a toddler the keys to a forklift. As the sorters work, soft conversation hums around you. One mentions that the monsoon winds last year made the resin unusually soft, a detail wrapped in both science and superstition. Another comments that a specific grove in the hills produced resin with a sweeter scent this season. You lean in to sniff, but accidentally inhale a bit too enthusiastically and end up sneezing loudly enough to startle two pigeons roosting above the shelter. There's your first joke of the section. You, single-handedly disrupting centuries of tradition with one dramatic sneeze. A fringe tidbit comes next. One sorter explains that some families believe resin pieces shaped like tiny hearts bring good luck when burned. She shows you one, indeed, a small lump vaguely heart-like, but in the sort of way a potato can also be heart-like if you tilt your head. She places it aside carefully, though. Whether or not luck is measurable, the gesture feels meaningful. A second joke arrives when you try to mimic a sorter's quick sorting motion. You give it a confident flick and immediately send 3 resin grains rolling across the floor like runaway marbles. 2 sorters chuckle softly. The third gives you the same look a teacher gives when a student proudly turns in a blank test. You retrieve the grains, muttering something about gravity conspiring against your artistic expression. Work continues steadily. The sorter's hands never stop moving, even when they talk. Their silence isn't uncomfortable, it's purposeful, composed. The shelter becomes a sanctuary from the outside glare, a place where the world shrinks to palm frond shadows and the steady rhythm of resin shifting beneath practiced fingers. You settle deeper into the mat and almost forget time is passing. But even here, debates linger. One elder sorter tells you that some merchants want resin sorted only by color, while others demand increasingly specific grades, size, clarity, scent, even the tiniest imperfections. Historians still argue whether the intricate grading systems used today evolved from medieval trade practices or were refined much later in response to global markets. You watch the sorters respond to these demands with calm adaptability, adjusting their work without losing their sense of tradition. You observe a sorter separate a particularly sticky lump from the rest. She taps it, pinches it, and then holds it toward you, encouraging you to smell it. You lean close, cautiously this time. The aroma is richer than the others, deeper, almost balsamic. She nods knowingly. "Too fresh," she murmurs. "It will be left out longer to dry before anyone attempts to grade it." You tuck that bit of knowledge away, feeling oddly proud of your growing resin vocabulary. The third joke practically hands itself to you when a grain sticks to your fingertip, refusing to drop no matter how much you shake your hand. A sorter gently peels it away, telling you with a straight face that this grain simply likes you too much. You nod solemnly, as though accepting this as genuine emotional attachment from a pebble of tree sap. Outside, the sun climbs higher. The shelter stays cool thanks to its low roof and woven walls. Shadows shift slowly across the resin piles, making them sparkle like heaps of crushed gemstones. You notice the sorters never hurry, even when working through large quantities. Speed is secondary to clarity, and clarity is everything. A young apprentice sorts beside an elder, comparing grains, asking questions, receiving no-nonsense answers. You see skill passed down in gestures more than words. Watching them, you feel the faint sense of learning a secret craft, not by instruction, but by simply being present long enough. Eventually, one of the sorters taps your arm and points toward a fresh mound brought in by harvesters. It's larger than the others, a chaotic mix of colors and sizes. The sorter smiles as if inviting you to attempt it. You exhale, roll your shoulders, and dive in with renewed determination. Your technique is clumsy, your decisions hesitant, but your enthusiasm earns gentle approval. Somewhere between your fumbling and the rhythmic work around you, you lose track of everything outside this shelter. The desert hum, the sunlight, the shifting resin, all of it folds into the same slow, steady cadence. Sorting becomes less about perfection and more about attention, patience, and breath. And just as you begin to feel the motion settle into your muscles, a shadow stretches across the doorway, the signal that it's time to move deeper into the world of resin grades and destinies that await beyond this quiet sanctuary. You follow the sorters out of the palm frond shelter, blinking like someone emerging from a dim cinema into the blinding real world, except instead of a parking lot and stale popcorn smell, you're met with a stretch of desert that glitters with the soft radiance of early heat. The resin piles you worked on were only the beginning. Ahead lies a small clearing marked by woven baskets, clay bowls, and mats arranged with deliberate symmetry. This is where the real sorting, the fine grading, happens. A sorter waves you over to a mat with an encouraging nod, the universal sign for, you survived the beginner level. Let's see how you handle expert mode. You take your place, drop cross-legged onto the mat, and instantly feel one pebble of resin lodge itself under your thigh. There's your first joke of the section. Nothing says deep cultural immersion quite like sitting directly on your homework. The clearing is peaceful, but alive. A breeze carries the faint citrus balsamic scent of boswellia resin, mingling with dust, sun, and the distant grumbling of a camel who is absolutely offended by something, probably your posture. The sorters kneel in a loose circle. Each has a mound of resin before them, raw, mixed, and waiting to be transformed into organized worth. One woman hands you a shallow wooden tray. "Now you learn the grades," she says. Her voice is calm, but the statement carries the weight of a teacher presenting an exam. You nod seriously. Then you immediately tilt the tray too far and almost spill everything. She catches it with one finger, leaning in with a smirk that says, "Relax. The trees are patient. You should be too." The grading categories are subtle but crucial. She explains them by holding up different grains between her thumb and forefinger. The first is nearly white, like a milk drop bead. "This one," she says, "is the best. It's called Bio, prized for its clarity and light color." She places it in a neat pile. Then she shows you a more yellow, slightly clouded grain, still valuable, but not top tier. Last, she holds a darker, dustier piece, softer around the edges, the sort that will be used for local markets or traditional medicine. You repeat the exercise, placing grains where you think they belong. Your choices earn a few nods and one raised eyebrow. You're pretty sure that eyebrow alone could tell your whole life story. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder once wrote about frankincense, describing how it was collected in sacks and controlled by local tribes who guarded the trade routes with fierce dedication. You glance at the sorters around you, hands moving rhythmically, and realize the guardianship hasn't vanished. It's simply taken on quieter, steadier forms. You lean closer to your tray, attempting to imitate the sorter's fluid motions. You pinch a grain, lift it to the light, and pose your lips thoughtfully. You have no idea what posing your lips achieves, but everyone else is doing it, and peer pressure is eternal. When you set the grain down, wrong pile, of course, the sorter beside you gently pushes it into the correct category without breaking her conversation. Her fingers are fast, sure, and soft as drifting sand. When another sorter tells you that some frankincense enthusiasts, yes, apparently that is a niche fandom, claim they can tell which hillside a resin came from based purely on the shape of the grains. She leans in, lowers her voice conspiratorially, and adds, "I don't think anyone can actually do that. But we let them pretend." She winks. You feel instantly inducted into a secret society of gentle sarcasm. You return to your sorting tray with renewed confidence, or at least with renewed determination not to embarrass yourself. You pick up a beautiful pale grain and hold it triumphantly in the air like a soccer referee awarding a penalty kick. The sorter across from you squints and says, "That one is second grade." Your hand slowly drifts downward like a balloon losing air. And there's your second joke. Somewhere, in a parallel universe, you are a professional frankincense grader. Just not this universe, or any universe with physics. The sorting circle continues. The breeze picks up slightly, sending thin ripples across the mats like fabric breathing. You watch the sorter's hands perform micro-movements so fast they look almost unreal. Sifting, pinching, tapping, arranging. Resin pieces click softly against one another. A rhythm emerges. Lift, examine, sort. Lift, examine, sort. It's hypnotic, and before you know it, your breath matches the cadence. Nearby, two sorters begin a mild debate about grain size versus clarity in determining quality. They speak quietly, almost clinically. You catch enough to understand that even within sorting circles, opinions differ. Historians still argue whether these grading distinctions emerged from ancient trade guilds or whether they developed in the last few centuries as markets became more global and more demanding. You wonder how many debates like this have echoed across desert clearings over the centuries. At one point, you accidentally sort a tiny pebble that is very much not frankincense into the top-grade pile. A sorter picks it up, raises her eyebrows, and laughs softly. Third joke incoming. She tells you the pebble is, in fact, the rare Boswellia metallica, a rock. You accept this diagnosis with the solemnity it deserves. The sun climbs higher, tinting the clearing in soft gold. Shadows shrink beneath the woven baskets. Someone places a clay bowl of cool water near you. You sip gratefully, and for a moment the world narrows to the taste of dust and clarity. The sorters don't hurry. They never do. The work requires attention, not speed. Every grain tells a story of the tree it came from, its stresses, its seasons, its health. As you settle deeper into the task, your motions begin to loosen. You no longer analyze every grain with deep existential panic. Your fingers grow more confident, your decisions more intuitive. You're still wildly inaccurate, but you feel accurate, and sometimes that's enough for personal growth. A young apprentice sits beside you now. She hands you a grain and asks what grade it is. You answer tentatively. She giggles, because you're wrong, but also because she remembers being wrong too. She shows you why. The edges are too rough, the color a shade too dark, the clarity not quite luminous enough. You nod, committing the detail to memory like a student learning a musical scale. The clearing grows warm. Resin softens slightly under the sun's touch, and the sorters shift to keep the delicate grains from sticking together. Someone opens a woven basket lined with cloth and begins placing the highest grade pieces inside. These will travel far, possibly to perfumeries or religious ceremonies. The thought expands your sense of the world. These tiny grains, born on desert cliffs, will influence the moods, rituals, and aromas of places you've never seen. Your final handful of grains passes through your fingers slower than before. You examine them one by one, mindful of the rhythm that surrounds you. Sorting isn't loud, or dramatic, or heroic. It's a quiet craft, patient, observant, unhurried. By the time you finish, your fingers are dusted with resin, your knees ache slightly from sitting, and your understanding of this world has deepened a full shade richer. The sorter beside you stands, stretching her back. She nods toward the horizon where camels wait, loads half-tied. The next part of the craft is calling, the part where these grains must begin their journey outward. You dust off your hands, rise, and follow. You step away from the grading mats, brushing resin dust from your palms, though it clings like it has emotional attachment issues. The sorters guide you toward a low outcrop overlooking a shallow valley where the fragrance thickens in the warming air. Here, the resin isn't just seen or touched, it's inhaled, studied, interpreted. This is where scent becomes a map, and where you, still slightly sticky, are about to learn how veterans read its hidden landmarks. A sorter named Warsame motions you closer. He's older, with hands that look carved from the same limestone cliffs you've been tripping over all morning. He pinches a pale grain between his fingers, rolls it, then lifts it under your nose. Smell, he says simply. You inhale. The scent is soft, bright, almost lemony, with a sweetness beneath. You nod with the seriousness of someone pretending they've just uncovered profound cosmic truths. Warsame grins. Tree was happy when this formed, he says. You blink. Happy trees, you're on board with the concept. A cheerful resin origins story feels comforting, even if scientifically questionable. He continues, dry season was long, wind was gentle, roots reached you. It's a poetic assessment, and yet you sense the layers of knowledge beneath it. Sorters here don't just look at resin. They smell its history. A mainstream historical fact rises to meet this moment. In the temples of ancient Babylonia, priests burned frankincense not just for ritual but as a tool for reading omens. The smoke's behavior, whether it rose in a straight line or drifted sideways, was interpreted as insight into divine moods. You imagine one of those priests handing Warsame a sample, and Warsame gently correcting his technique. He picks up another grain, darker and slightly sticky. Tree was stressed, he murmurs. Maybe goats chewed its leaves. Maybe rains were late. You sniff again. The scent is sharper, more balsamic, with an oathy undercurrent. You nod, telling yourself you can tell the difference. Let's be honest, at this point, you're mostly inhaling and hoping your face communicates strong, scent-based wisdom. When a younger sorter tells you that some locals swear they can smell if a tree has been gossiped about, you laugh, thinking he's joking, until he clarifies, deadpan, that trees pick up human moods. You respond with your first joke of the section. Well, good news, I've only humiliated myself twice today, so the trees should be thrilled. The sorters settle in a semicircle, passing grains back and forth like musicians tuning instruments. Each time someone lifts a piece to their nose, the whole group leans slightly in, as if they are reading a shared language written in scents instead of letters. You take your place among them, and though your contributions are occasionally disastrous, like the moment you confidently describe a resin as smelling like air, they accept your attempts with gentle amusement. As the digging breeze stirs your hair, the scents shift in faint waves. Some grains smell brighter, almost floral. Others carry hints of pepper or dry herbs. A sorter named Huda teaches you how to cup your hand loosely around a grain to trap its aroma, then inhale softly through your nose like you're about to critique a fancy glass of wine. You try this. It works. And now you feel absurdly professional, which leads to your second joke. You declare yourself a level 1 aroma apprentice, prompting Huda to pat your shoulder with the pitying affection reserved for well-meaning tourists. The sorters explain how scent can indicate not only the tree's health but also how long ago the resin hardened. Fresher pieces smell sharper, older ones mellow into something rounder and warmer. But scent can also hint at the tapping method, the microclimate, even the direction the tree leaned during growth. You stare at a grain in awe, realizing it contains a detective story no microscope could fully decode. Around you, the clearing fills with quiet concentration. The sorters speak little. They don't need to. Their noses do most of the talking. But even they admit that some scents refuse to fit neatly into categories. Historians still argue whether ancient incense traders used standardized scent tests or if individual noses decided quality back then just as they do today. Warsame insists scent is an art, not a science. Huda argues it's both. Meanwhile, you sniff a third grain too aggressively and accidentally inhale a speck of dust. You cough violently, eyes watering, earning the gentle applause of 3 amused sorters and 1 unimpressed camel. Third joke. You attempt to explain your coughing fit by claiming you were testing wind resistance. No one buys it. As the sun rises higher, resin warms, and the scents grow stronger. You can almost feel the air thickening, as if infused with invisible notes. Warsame hands you a particularly luminous grain. You smell citrus, pine, and something faintly like warm stone after rain. He nods approvingly. That tree is old, he says. Very old. Grows alone on a cliff. You picture it, a solitary boswellia tree clinging to a ledge, battered by wind but stubbornly producing resin with stories baked into each droplet. The image settles in your mind like a distant memory. Next, Huda places a mixed handful of grains before you. Find the sweetest scent, she challenges. You lean close, inhaling each piece in sequence like a curious hummingbird. Some are sharp, some mellow, some almost invisible in aroma. But one smells distinctly sweeter, with a warm amber whisper beneath. You pick it up triumphantly. She beams. Good, she says. Your nose is waking. You bask in this praise for a full half-second before Warsame hands you another handful and asks you to separate the wind-burned ones by scent. Your confidence deflates instantly, but you attempt it anyway. 2 guesses are correct. 1 is wildly wrong. And the last? You hand it back and say, this one smells suspicious. Everyone laughs. Not at you. Well, yes, also at you. But kindly, like a family teasing a younger sibling. A sudden gust of wind rustles the resin baskets, sending a swirl of scent up and around the clearing. You close your eyes, letting the aromatic wave pass over you. The desert hums softly. The resin breathes its stories. And you breathe them in. In that moment, something shifts. You stop thinking about categories and correctness. You let your nose guide you. You pick up a grain, inhale, and recognize warmth. Another, sharpness. Another, softness. It becomes less about analysis and more about attention, about being present enough to actually smell what the grain is offering. Warsame notices your change in posture, your calmer movements. He nods approvingly. Good, he murmurs. You are learning to listen. Scent, it turns out, is just another kind of listening. The session slowly winds down as sorters begin collecting their categorized grains into bowls and baskets. The fragrance lingers in your nose, in your hair, in your breath. You feel saturated with it, like you've walked through a doorway into a sensory world most people never notice. The sorters rise, stretching arms and backs. Someone calls for water. Someone else calls for shade. And you, newly anointed, however poorly, in the art of resin scent, follow them toward the next stage of the journey, where tiny grains influence not only senses but entire trading systems. You trail behind the sorters as they leave the scent clearing, each carrying bowls and baskets now filled with carefully judged resin. The sun has gathered its strength, casting a honey-colored glow over the valley, and the heat presses gently against your skin like a warm hand guiding you onward. It feels as though the desert itself is nudging you toward the next lesson, one less about aroma and more about the quiet machinery of survival. The sorters lead you to a flatter stretch of ground where a few makeshift awnings of goatskin and palm fronds cast patches of mottled shade. Beneath them sit elders, merchants, apprentices, and even a few wandering herders who have stopped to trade gossip and perhaps exchange a handful of resin for tea. This small gathering hums with a subdued energy, the desert version of an economic conference, but with more camels and significantly fewer lanyards. A sorter named Salma pats the ground next to her, inviting you to sit. You oblige, lowering yourself onto a woven mat that sighs under your weight. At this point, every mat in Somaliland has formed an opinion about you, and none of those opinions are especially flattering. There's your first joke of the section. You're single-handedly broadening the international understanding of awkward mat etiquette. Before you, the sorters spread their newly arranged piles, pale top-grade grains, amber mid-grade pieces, and the darker, dustier fragments reserved for local uses. The bowls form a quiet spectrum of color and value. You feel the underlying tension of the sorting choices, the way a handful of lighter grains could mean a week's worth of food for a family, while the darker grains might help only a little. Tiny pebbles of resin, small enough to lose between your fingers, carry the weight of whole households. A mainstream historical fact floats through your thoughts. The frankincense trade once linked Africa, Arabia, and the Mediterranean in a vast web of caravans and ships, creating wealth so significant that Roman senators complained about how much incense their citizens burned during festivals. Somewhere, 2 millennia ago, a politician was already shaking his fist and shouting, "We're spending how much on scented smoke?" Here and now, the trade isn't imperial, it's personal. Every grain sorted today could become a cold season coat, a bag of rice, a school fee. Salma explains that even small differences in grade can shift value dramatically. She places 2 nearly identical grains in your palm, asking which one seems more valuable. You point to the clearer one. She nods but adds, "Sometimes merchants disagree. Sometimes markets shift." She shrugs. The desert economy breathes, sometimes deeply, sometimes shallowly. No one controls its rhythm. You lean back slightly, watching the group discuss the day's prices. One merchant believes export demand will rise because perfumers in Dubai are requesting a specific clarity. Another argues that monks in Ethiopia recently placed a large order of mid-grade resin, so middle values may spike. Historians still argue whether these flexible, ever-changing market instincts mirror ancient trade patterns or whether the past system was more rigid. Either way, you see the echoes of old networks in the easy gestures, the knowing glances, the compact clusters of conversation. A hider sits beside you, offering a small payment in resin for help repairing a sandal strap. A boy rushes past carrying a bundle of firewood. A woman weighs a bowl of grains on a simple hanging scale. The scene feels mundane, but underneath is the quiet hum of survival, of families maintaining a delicate balance between what the land provides and what the world demands. One elder tells you that certain traders, long ago, claimed they could predict entire seasons based solely on how resin cracked under pressure. He demonstrates by pinching a grain until it fractures with a clean snap. "Dry year," he jokes, though the twinkle in his eye suggests he's only half kidding. You try to imitate him with your own grain, but it crumbles instead of snapping. The elder frowns theatrically and declares, "Ah, this means the goats will be moody." Second joke delivered. You decide moody goats are a universal constant and feel surprisingly comforted. As conversations swirl, You notice how naturally sorting blends into bargaining, how the shift from craft to commerce happens without ceremony. Salma hands a bowl of high-grade resin to a merchant, who examines the grains with the same reverence a jeweler might give diamonds. He tests a few pieces, rolls them between his fingers, even sniffs one. With a nod, he taps the rim of the bowl and offers a price. Negotiation begins, not heated, but steady and calm. A slow dance of numbers and nods. You understand now how vital the sorter's decisions are. If they misjudge a grain, too high or too low, the ripple spreads. A family might earn less. A long-distance caravan might struggle with supply. A merchant might lose trust. You briefly panic at the memory of your earlier attempts at sorting and whisper to Salma, "I hope none of my piles accidentally ended up in the expensive basket." She chuckles. "Don't worry," she says. "We fixed your piles long before they left your mat." Third joke earned. Apparently you are now officially part of the quality control hazard list. Heat deepens as midday creeps closer. Shadows shrink. A few camels groan softly, as if resenting the sun for existing. The air thickens with a warm, resin-laced stillness. Yet commerce continues. A young apprentice carries bowls back and forth between elders. An older woman meticulously ties bundles with date fiber string. You watch her wrap and knot with the grace of someone who's done this motion 10,000 times. Someone offers you a cup of spiced tea. You sip, letting the warmth settle into you. The tea carries the faint taste of cardamom and wood smoke. Around you, trade decisions slowly finalize. Merchants gather their purchased resin into cloth sacks. Sorters collect their earnings in folded leather pouches. Children run across the sand with new coins, their laughter slicing through the heat. And everywhere, the economy breathes, softly, steadily, like a giant creature slumbering under the dunes. By the time the bowls are emptied and the last merchant wanders off toward the distant market path, you realize just how interconnected the desert truly is. Resin isn't merely a product, it's a thread binding families, communities, and faraway destinations. It is small, but it carries weight. And you carry a bit of it now, too, still stuck under your fingernails, still perfuming your sleeves. The sorters gather their belongings, preparing for the next leg of the day. Salma tilts her head toward the ridge where camels wait with half-filled saddlebags. "Come," she says. "The resin travels south now. And so do we." You stand, stretch, shake the dust from your legs, and follow. You climb the gentle rise beside the sorters, your sandals kicking up small puffs of sand that glitter in the late morning light. Ahead, the camels wait, tall, unbothered, and wearing the kind of world-weary expression that suggests they've seen every human mistake and fully expect you to contribute a new one before the day ends. Their saddlebags sway lightly in the breeze, already half-filled with bundled frankincense wrapped in layers of cloth and palm fiber. They look almost ceremonial, like treasure chests strapped to wandering, mildly grumpy ships. A handler named Warsame pats the flank of the nearest camel, muttering encouragement in Somali. You approach, determined to look competent, but the camel lowers its head and huffs directly into your face. The warm breath smells faintly of cud and contempt. That's your first joke of the section. You've just been judged by a creature famous for eating thorn bushes without complaint. Salma passes you a small bundle of resin tied neatly with fiber string. "For your pockets," she says. "To carry the scent of the day." You tuck it carefully into your cloth pouch, feeling the small weight press against your hip. Even this tiny packet feels significant. A mainstream historical fact springs to mind. The ancient Nabateans once loaded thousands of such bundles onto caravans moving north toward Petra, using frankincense taxes to build desert cities where water, commerce, and stone-carved architecture converged. You picture those ancient camel trains, long lines shimmering in heat, resonating through time and mirroring the very scene you're walking into. Salma gives you a woven strap to hold, and suddenly you find yourself guiding one of the camels. Or rather, attempting to. The camel takes a single step, glances back at you, and decides to walk diagonally toward a bush for absolutely no reason. Warsame laughs, correcting its course with a quick click of his tongue. They like to test newcomers, he says. You passed. Barely. The small caravan slowly forms, 6 camels, 3 handlers, several sorters, and you, the honorary chaos variable. The air trembles faintly with heat, though a dry breeze slips across your arms. As you walk, the desert opens wider, revealing rolling stretches of pale scrub and ridges like sleeping giants lying beneath woven blankets of sand. The rhythmic thump of camel feet becomes a kind of heartbeat for the journey. Soft, steady, grounding. Eventually, the caravan reaches a narrow pass where rocky outcrops jut like weathered monuments. The path constricts, funneling you between stone walls dotted with tiny, tenacious shrubs. The sorters fall into single file, and even the camels quiet their grumbling. The air cools in the shade of the rocks, carrying a faint echo of footsteps and soft murmurs. It feels like walking into a throat of the earth, the landscape swallowing sound. Salma leans toward you to whisper, "This is old ground. Caravans passed here for centuries." Historians still argue whether these specific passes were once formal trade routes or simply convenient shortcuts, but either way, the sense of age settles over you like a thin layer of dust. You place your hand on the stone wall as you walk, palm brushing grooves carved by wind, sand, and perhaps human fingers long before yours. He insists that in his grandfather's day, camel handlers believed that talking to the camels about dreams, specifically dreams involving rain, made the animals walk straighter and behave better. To demonstrate, he leans close to the lead camel and murmurs, "Tonight you will dream of storms, my friend." The camel blinks slowly, then sneezes. You take this as a sign of either agreement or total disrespect. Either way, second joke achieved. As the path widens again, the group settles into a gentler rhythm. You feel the sun return, warming the back of your neck. The camel's shadows stretch long and elegant across the uneven ground. Each step seems to fold time a little more. You imagine distant ports, ancient Gaza, bustling Alexandria, the fragrant markets of Muscat. All of them historically fed by resin traveling just like this, on the backs of animals who couldn't care less about international trade. You begin to notice how each handler has a unique relationship with their camel. Warsame speaks to his constantly, explaining rocks, clouds, and even telling it minor gossip about the local village. Another handler, Ayon, uses subtle touches and shifts of rope, almost like she's guiding a dance partner with invisible music. Her camel responds with gentle precision. When you try to imitate her technique, your camel wobbles sideways once more, forcing you to sidestep dramatically. Ayon chuckles softly. "Don't worry," she says. "He likes you. He's just confused why you exist." Third joke secured. The landscape gradually shifts as the group descends into a shallow valley where the wind carries hints of salt and distant water. Scraggly trees bow in one direction, honoring a prevailing wind that has shaped them for decades. The air feels thicker, more textured. You inhale deeply and catch the swirling combination of resin, camel hair, dust, and the faint mineral tang of inland breezes. The caravan stops near a cluster of stones arranged into a low circle. It resembles an old fire pit, though Salma explains it once served as a resting marker for caravans heading toward Berber's old port. This valley, she tells you, was known for its echoing winds. Travelers would whistle into the gusts and swear that the desert whistled back. You try whistling. A weak sound escapes your lips before dissolving instantly in the breeze. The desert offers no reply, which feels like a polite but firm rejection. As the camels kneel and supplies are redistributed, you sit on a sun-warmed rock. Your legs buzz from the long walk, but your mind feels strangely calm. Camels snort. Handlers chat. Sorters sip water from shade containers. All of it forms a tapestry of movement and life woven into the quiet mechanics of moving frankincense from harvest to market. You realize now that this journey isn't just logistics, it's stewardship. Every step is part of a chain older than nearly any written record. The resin you saw exuding from tree bark at dawn will eventually perfume a monastery, a home altar, a shop, or a perfumer's studio across the world. Tiny grains, massive distances. The handlers rouse the camels again. The journey must continue. You stand, dusting sand from your knees, and take hold of the strap once more. This time, when your camel looks at you, you swear the disdain in its eyes has softened to mild tolerance. And in the desert, that's practically affection. You crest a low ridge with the caravan, and suddenly the world widens like a great, sunlit page being turned. The wind shifts, carrying faint hints of salt, distant water, and the mingled scents of spices you can't yet identify. Below, spread across a broad plain, lies the market where frankincense will continue its long journey, first by foot and camel, then perhaps by truck, and eventually by ship toward distant shores. You squint toward the gathering of tents, stalls, and makeshift awnings. It looks like someone took a medieval marketplace, added a few modern tarpaulins, threw in a couple of solar panels, and then asked the desert wind to arrange everything organically. It's chaotic, colorful, and humming with life. The camels snort as they begin their descent. Your camel, who has been mildly judging you all morning, now seems to enjoy the downhill pace, enough that it tries to accelerate more than you'd like. You tug the strap gently, whispering, "Slow down, please, I am fragile." The camel ignores the words but honors the tremble in your tone. There's your first joke of the section. You've discovered the true universal language of camel handling, abject fear. As you draw closer to the market, the air thickens with smells. Smoke from cooking fires, cardamom tea, grilled goat meat, warm dates, and the unmistakable tang of frankincense burned for display. Traders burn small piles to test scent quality for buyers, and the air vibrates with delicate threads of citrus, honey, pine, and something ancient that lingers in the throat like memory. You step through the threshold of the market as if crossing into another world. People call out greetings in Somali, Arabic, and sometimes English. Goats wander with an air of entitlement. Chickens weave between stalls. A pair of teenagers race past carrying crates of bright cloth. You feel yourself falling into the rhythm of commerce, lively yet somehow unhurried, like everyone has collectively agreed that money flows best when no one sprints. The sorters guide the camels toward a shaded area set aside for resin traders. Wooden tables stand under broad canvas roofs, and burlap sacks full of frankincense form neat rows. Some merchants sit cross-legged, scales and notebooks before them, while others stand with hands behind their backs, eyeing arrivals with quiet calculation. Salma gestures for you to help unload one of the saddlebags. You brace yourself, lift the bundle, and immediately underestimate its weight. It sags in your arms, and you perform a small, awkward dance to keep it from dropping. Wasame laughs again. "Careful," he says. "That bag is worth more than your sandals." Second joke earned, you don't disagree. The sorters begin transferring their resin bundles into bowls for inspection. A merchant wearing a crisp white makawis approaches, his expression serene and confident, the look of someone who has smelled enough resin to identify grade differences blindfolded while sleep-deprived. He greets the sorters by name and then gestures for Salma to present her highest grade pieces. She places a bowl before him and steps back. The merchant sifts through the grains with delicate fingers. He holds them up to the light, checks clarity, watches how they catch the sun. He presses one between thumb and forefinger, testing firmness. Then he lifts the bowl to his nose and inhales. His eyes close, and he nods slowly. It's a gesture heavy with unspoken arithmetic. A mainstream historical fact seeps into your thoughts as you observe him. In Roman times, specialized incense inspectors existed along caravan routes, trained to detect impurities or inferior grades. Wealthy temples paid handsomely for the finest resins, and inspectors held considerable authority. Watching the merchant now, you can almost picture a lineage stretching back to those ancient specialists. A young apprentice brings out a portable scale, simple, but precise. The merchant measures several samples, noting the weight-to-size ratio of the grains. He does not rush. Markets like this rely on patience, on relationships, on trust reinforced with repetition. Bargaining begins the same way it always has, with slow nods, narrowing eyes, soft murmurs, and the faintest tightening of jaw muscles. Another merchant steps forward, this one wearing sunglasses that make him look like a desert movie star. He asks Salma whether her trees grew in rocky soil or sandy patches this year, because certain perfumers prefer resin from trees stressed by harsh ground. Salma answers with measured honesty. Trees were drier this season, but rains came late and briefly revived them. The man in sunglasses smiles, satisfied. Historians still argue whether this modern system of sorting and selling mirrors the exact structure of ancient incense markets or whether today's trade is more flexible. But watching the merchants, you suspect little has changed in the core rituals: careful inspection, quiet negotiation, and the belief that resin carries the story of the land where it grew. One elder merchant claims he can tell the age of a tree by tasting the resin dust. He demonstrates by tapping a grain with his fingernail, collecting the powder, and touching it to his tongue. 50, maybe 60 years old, he announces confidently. Ayon rolls her eyes. He always says 50 or 60, she whispers. You resist the urge to taste the dust yourself. Third joke secured. You've officially reached the point in your journey where licking tree sap no longer feels strange. As bargaining continues, you wander slightly, observing other stalls. You watch a perfumer from Djibouti test different resins in a small brass burner. The smoke swirls upward, twisting like a thin silver ribbon in the air. She breathes it in with a soft, satisfied hum. She explains to a buyer that resin from the northern mountains carries sweeter notes, while southern varieties produce deeper, more medicinal aromas. Every swirl of smoke seems to hold a map of geography, climate, and human labor. Nearby, a group of young traders practice quick mental calculations, turning quality percentages into fair prices. They remind you of card players at a very aromatic casino. One laughs as he realizes he miscalculated by a decimal point. Another slaps his own forehead in exaggerated despair. The camaraderie feels genuine and warm. Salma returns to you with a small smile. We sold well today, she says. Good prices. Not perfect, but better than last season. She gestures toward her leather pouch, now noticeably heavier with folded notes. Her eyes gleam with quiet relief. You glance at the bundles still waiting to be sold, at the merchants discussing shipments, at camels resting in the shade with half-lidded eyes. The entire scene feels like a living organism, breathing, shifting, growing. The market is a crossroads, a meeting place of stories, hopes, and the gentle scent of resin rising subtly in the bright, warm air. Eventually, the sun begins to tilt westward, casting longer shadows through the stalls. The wind grows softer, carrying murmurs of trades completed and journeys yet to come. The sorters gather their remaining supplies and gesture for you to follow. Your time in the market is ending, but the day still holds more steps. You take one last look at the bustling scene, smoke drifting upward, merchants waving, camels chewing lazily, and feel the faintest tug of something ancient, something timeless. Then you walk on. You step out of the market's bustle with the sorters, leaving behind the swirl of voices, the shimmer of smoke, and the shifting tapestry of trade. The air immediately feels wider, quieter, as though the desert inhales again after holding its breath all afternoon. The sun hangs lower now, brushing the horizon with strokes of gold that pulse gently across the sand. Long shadows stretch like sleepy cats waking from a nap. The caravan has thinned, some merchants remain behind, some handlers split off toward nearby villages, and the perfumer from Djibouti rides away on the back of a small pickup truck that protests loudly in mechanical grumbles. You and the remaining sorters turn toward a path leading to a cluster of simple huts and tents in the distance, where families wait to hear how the day's trading went. As you walk, the wind carries pockets of warmth mixed with a faint coolness hinting at evening. Your camel companion shuffles along beside you, its pace finally matching yours, as if the creature has decided you are at least marginally competent. For now. You glance at Salma, who walks with shoulders a little more relaxed, her expression softer. She doesn't have to tell you the day went well. The desert communicates these things through posture and breath long before words arrive. Ayon teases her lightly about her bargaining, claiming she went too easy on one merchant. Next time, she says, stare at him longer before you accept his price. Make him uncomfortable. There's your first joke of the section. Apparently, discomfort is a legitimate negotiation tactic endorsed by elders. The path bends around a low rocky hill before opening into a modest settlement. Goats bleat from behind woven fences. Children play with tin can toys. A few women sit near cooking fires, roasting flatbread on iron pans while the scent of onions and cumin drifts toward you in warm waves. The transition from market to settlement feels like moving from the city's pulse to the heartbeat of a home. Salma raises her hand, and a little girl comes sprinting toward her, arms flung wide, squealing with joy. Salma kneels as the girl leaps into her arms. You recognize the unmistakable glow of a mother reunited with her child after a long, sun-beaten day. Salma whispers something in the girl's ear, producing a giggle, and then hands her a small piece of resin wrapped in cloth. For your collection, she tells her. The girl beams and scampers off, clutching her prize like treasure. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. For centuries, resin wasn't just a trade commodity. It was used in households for medicine, purification, and even as a form of aromatherapy long before the word existed. You imagine generations of children, much like this one, clutching tiny pieces of frankincense with pride, unaware that their toy once traveled routes that stretched across oceans and empires. You follow Salma into a communal area where mats are laid out under a large acacia tree. Its branches spread wide like a protective canopy, shading the sand beneath with dappled patches of coolness. Families gather slowly, curious to hear how the day unfolded. A few elders sit cross-legged, leaning heavily on carved walking sticks. Stories are exchanged in low, unhurried tones, punctuated by laughter that drifts easily through the air. You're invited to sit again, though the mat beneath you lets out a resigned sigh. Apparently, no mat in Somaliland has forgiven you. That's your second joke. You've somehow become the villain in a local textile rebellion. Children gather around, fascinated by your dusty clothes and the faint resin shimmer still stuck to your fingers. One boy asks if foreign countries really burn frankincense just to smell good. You nod sheepishly. He squints at you as though re-evaluating everything he knows about global priorities. A woman named Shukri brings a tray of steaming tea glasses. The tea tastes richer here, infused with cloves and a hint of ginger. As you sip, she asks how you fared along the path. Before you can answer, Ayon jumps in, announcing loudly that you walk like a giraffe trying to tiptoe. Laughter erupts, including yours. Third joke. At this point, you've accepted your role as the day's entertainment. As the conversation continues, you learn how each family's livelihood intertwines with the resin trade. Some gather, some sort, some carry, some sell. Others weave sacks, tend camels, or prepare food for workers. The entire settlement is part of the trade. Every age, every hand, every pair of steady eyes watching resin grains pass from harvest to market. Historians still argue whether the incense economy historically depended more on centralized authorities or on these smaller, interlinked family networks. Sitting here, you're inclined to believe the latter. The desert doesn't care much for hierarchy. It favors those who can adapt, share, and survive through collective effort. As twilight deepens, stories shift. One elder begins recounting an old tale. The time a migrating caravan followed a star, only to discover it was just light reflecting off a merchant's overly polished kettle. Another woman describes the year rains arrived early and the trees exuded so much resin that it fell in droplets on sleeping goats, causing great confusion the next morning. These aren't just stories, they're oral histories wrapped in humor, grounded in real moments. Someone claims that certain trees prefer specific pickers. They argue that trees release resin more abundantly for people whose voices they like. Warsame whistles softly and pats the trunk of an imaginary tree to demonstrate. The group laughs, but no one dismisses the idea outright. In the desert, superstition and practicality shake hands often. Shukri passes out small bowls of spiced lentils, warm and comforting. You eat slowly, grateful for food, shade, and company. The settlement hums with the gentle rhythm of evening. Women roll dough. Men repair tools. Children chase each other with sticks that serve as imaginary swords. The smell of cooking mingles with faint resin notes still clinging to your clothes and the air. You notice that the sorters slip gradually into another task, quietly allocating their earnings for the week. Some set aside money for school supplies, others for goat feed or small household needs. You watch Salma fold her notes into a cloth pouch. She checks them twice before storing them safely. Her careful manner carries the weight of responsibility. As the evening cools, someone lights a small burner, letting a wisp of frankincense smoke rise upward. The scent lifts into the air, weaving through the branches above. It feels ceremonial, an exhale marking the end of a long day. The settlement dims as lanterns flicker alive. Small pinpoints of warm light glow within huts and tents. The sky deepens into a dark, velvety blue punctured by early stars. Conversations soften. Children yawn. Even the goats settle into quiet bleats. The sorters gather their belongings again. You realize they are preparing to move once more, perhaps toward a home camp or a sleeping shelter farther from the market path. The day isn't fully over yet. You rise, brushing sand from your clothes, which at this point may as well be their natural color. The camel nudges your shoulder as if to say, "Try not to embarrass us tonight." You pat its neck. It tolerates your affection for precisely 1 second before turning away. The settlement waves as you depart, and once again, you step into the cooling desert evening. You walk with the sorters into a deepening dusk, the kind that drapes itself over the desert with a softness you didn't expect. The last scraps of sunlight fade behind distant ridges, turning the sky into a glowing ribbon of rose gold melting into indigo. A gentle wind tugs at your clothes, cooler now, carrying the quiet promise of nighttime. Ahead, the camels plod with solemn patience, their silhouettes tall and strangely regal against the fading light. The sorters have shifted into their evening pace, slower, quieter, more reflective. Even Ayon, who earlier teased you relentlessly, now walks with her gaze lifted toward the stars just beginning to appear. She points at one bright pinpoint and says, "There. That's the guide for tomorrow morning." You nod, pretending you understand celestial navigation while internally acknowledging you can barely navigate to a charging cable in your own apartment. Your camel grumbles behind you, then flicks its ear directly into your face. That's your first joke of the section. Apparently, camels believe that flicking an ear at someone is a fully acceptable form of communication. You decide to take it as a friendly greeting rather than an insult. You follow the group to a sheltered spot between two sandstone outcrops, where the wind softens and the sand collects in gentle drifts. This is where they'll camp for the night. It's not a formal campsite, no tents pitched in neat rows, no designated cooking area, but rather the kind of place chosen instinctively, based on wind direction, available shade, and the texture of the ground beneath your feet. The desert rewards those who understand its moods. Salma marks a crescent-shaped area with her foot. Here, she says, the sand is firm, and the night wind stays above us. You kneel to feel it, surprised by the faint warmth still held beneath its surface. The sand behaves like a living blanket, absorbing heat during the day, releasing it slowly as darkness unfolds. The group begins setting up. Mats are rolled out. Camels kneel with practiced ease, making low groaning noises that sound like complaints but are really just camel lullabies. A few sorters unpack small bundles of firewood collected earlier. A tiny fire springs to life near the rock face, its glow illuminating faces with soft, flickering halos. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind as the fire crackles. Camel caravans once traveled these lands for weeks at a time, using simple camps like this as nightly anchors. Some ancient traders kept detailed journals describing the desert's night skies, marking the positions of constellations to maintain their routes. You imagine one such traveler sitting exactly where you sit now, centuries ago, warming hands over a similar fire. You settle onto your mat, another long-suffering textile forced to endure your presence, and stretch your legs. Ion hands you a tin cup. When you take a sip, you realize it's not tea but warm milk infused with a hint of honey. It's thick, comforting, and tastes like something meant to calm the body after hours of sun and sand. Ion raises an eyebrow. Careful, she says. If you drink too much, you'll sleep through the camel calls in the morning. Second joke. The idea of sleeping through a camel call is impossible. Those majestic beasts can produce sounds that would wake someone in another time zone. As the night settles deeper, the stars multiply. Whole riverbeds of starlight spill across the sky, bright enough to make you forget the world outside this quiet desert pocket. The Milky Way drapes overhead like an extravagant scarf tossed across the heavens. A child from the settlement earlier, apparently having followed the caravan, points upward and says, "It looks like spilled sugar." You can't help smiling. It's a perfect description. The sorters begin sharing stories, their voices rising and falling with the firelight. Warsame recounts the time a camel wandered off in the middle of the night, only to return at dawn carrying someone's missing sandals in its mouth. He wanted attention, Warsame insists. And he got it. Ion groans. That camel is still dramatic, she mutters. You suspect she's right. As the laughter fades, Salma gestures toward the resin bundles stacked neatly beside the mats. Tomorrow, she says, the elders in the coastal town will evaluate these for shipment. She glances at you. You'll see how far the journey goes. You nod, feeling a small thrill ripple through your tired limbs. You hadn't realized you'd be traveling even farther. When Salma admits that some elders believe resin sleeps better when bundled tightly and rested near a warm stone overnight. She pats one of the bundles as if tucking it in. Happy resin, she says, travels well. You decide not to question this logic. Third joke. You catch yourself wondering whether you should be sleeping near a warm stone to travel better tomorrow. The fire dwindles to glowing embers. The desert grows even quieter. You hear only the faint scratch of sand sliding down small dunes, the soft chew of a camel grinding its dinner, and the occasional whistle of a night breeze brushing past the rock walls. Shadows dance like slow-moving spirits. Someone begins humming a low, rhythmic tune. It carries no words, just a gentle rise and fall like the sway of a distant caravan. You let the sound wash over you, your breath sinking with its tempo. Your eyelids grow heavy. For a moment, you wonder whether you should stay awake to witness the full spread of stars across the sky. But the warmth of the sand beneath you tempts you downward. Historians still argue whether ancient caravan camps used structured night watches or whether travelers simply trusted the desert to protect those who respected its rhythms. Tonight, the sorters seem to trust the land. Maybe the desert knows you're here. Maybe it approves. Or maybe it just assumes you're too exhausted to cause trouble. As you settle deeper into your mat, someone drapes a lightweight blanket across your shoulders. The gesture is so gentle you barely notice the weight until you exhale with relief. The camel beside you sighs too, which feels like accidental solidarity. Above, the stars shimmer. Around you, the sorters drift into soft conversations and soft sleep. And you, somehow dusty, weary, and unexpectedly at peace, close your eyes and surrender to the desert night. You wake before the sun, roused not by a gentle desert breeze or the poetic call of dawn birds, but by the unmistakable sound of a camel loudly clearing its throat mere inches from your face. It's a bellowing, gravelly gargle that vibrates through your skull like a living alarm clock with boundary issues. That's your first joke of the section. Nature's least subtle snooze button has struck. You sit up, bleary-eyed, brushing sand from your hair while the world slowly brightens into a muted palette of lavender and pale gold. The desert at this hour feels like a held breath, cool, silent, expectant. The sand, which last night radiated warmth, now chills your palms. The sky blushes softly at the horizon, hinting at the coming heat. Around you, the sorters stir to life. Salma stretches her arms overhead, back popping faintly. Ayon rolls up her mat with the speed of someone who's done it 1,000 times. Warsame hums a tune as he checks the camel's ties, pausing occasionally to give a reassuring pat or mutter at an overly dramatic animal. The resin bundles, stacked neatly for the night, now carry a faint warmth from the stones beneath them, as though they, too, shared dreams under the stars. The air still holds the smoky traces of last night's fire, mixed with a subtle sweetness, a reminder of the resin tucked inside soft cloth and fiber string. You inhale deeply. There's something grounding about the scent. It feels ancient, steady, like a story that has been repeating for centuries. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind as you rise. Ancient incense caravans often traveled before sunrise to avoid midday heat, using the early hours to cover long distances efficiently. Travelers described the dawn marches as the most serene moments of desert life. Standing here, wrapped in cool air and quiet glow, you finally understand what they meant. Someone hands you a cup of morning tea, hot, fragrant, infused with cardamom and a touch of smoke. You cradle it between your palms, letting the warmth seep into your fingers. Your camel, now seemingly satisfied with its morning theatrics, chews contentedly nearby, occasionally side-eyeing you as if to check whether you're still alive. Ayon walks past, grinning. "Good," she says. "You survived the camel chorus." She gestures toward the animal. She likes to perform for newcomers. Second joke. Apparently you attended an unsolicited camel concert at dawn. The sorters begin preparing the caravan again. Saddlebags are checked and tightened. Resin bundles are redistributed to balance weight. Simple breakfast, flatbread and dates, is shared. You bite into a date that tastes intensely sweet, almost caramel-like, its sugar jolting your brain awake. As the sky brightens, the landscape gradually sharpens into clarity. Shadows shrink at a slow, steady pace. Small desert shrubs glow softly as sunlight kisses their edges. The wind carries a thin, cool whisper, the last coolness of the day before the heat sets in like a long guest overstaying its welcome. Before long, the caravan begins moving eastward, toward a larger settlement near the coast. You loop your hand through the camel's lead strap and walk beside it. The sand is firm beneath your feet, slightly packed from wind. Your steps fall into the same rhythm as the camel's long strides, creating a gentle syncopated beat. You feel strangely proud. Perhaps you've finally learned to walk in a way that the desert approves of. The path curves through shallow valleys dotted with hardy acacia trees. Resinous scents drift from trees that still bear their pale scars from tapping. You trail your fingers along a low branch as you pass, feeling the texture of bark warm beneath your touch. The tree stands patient, persistent, a quiet survivor in a land that demands resilience. Historians still argue whether some groves in this region are the same ones tapped during ancient incense booms thousands of years ago, or whether shifting climates forced entire populations of trees to migrate slowly. You look at the trees around you and imagine the stories they hold. Windstorms, droughts, generations of hands collecting resin bead by bead. Along the path, you spot an unusual sight, a small mound of stones arranged in a neat triangle. Salma taps your shoulder. "Rest marker," she explains. "Caravans left them to guide others." She kneels and adjusts one stone that has fallen. "Still good to keep the path clear." Warsame chimes in as he insists that some markers were once enchanted by traveling poets who claimed they could whisper directions in strong winds. To demonstrate, he leans toward the stones and listens dramatically. "Ah yes," he says, "they say the camels will choose the pace today." The camels loudly protest in unison, as if offended at being blamed for anything. Third joke secured. You've never seen a group of animals disagree so loudly with metaphysical stone advice. As the caravan moves forward, the light shifts from gold to bright amber. Heat slowly unfurls across the landscape. Beads of sweat prick your forehead, but a salty breeze rises from somewhere ahead, offering hints of relief. The distant coastline remains unseen for now, but the air grows more humid, more textured, carrying the faint promise of the sea. Suddenly, the path dips into a shallow ravine where smooth stones line the ground. You tread carefully, the uneven surface forcing you to slow down. A flock of bright blue birds flit overhead, darting between the branches with sharp, excited chirps. Their wings catch the sunlight, flashing like shards of sky. The moment is small but mesmerizing, a burst of color in a world ruled by earth tones. The sorters point out animal tracks in the sand, gazelle, fox, and even hyena from the night before. The desert might look empty from afar, but up close, it's alive with quiet motion and hidden stories. You crouch down to examine the tracks, and Salma explains how to read their age by the crispness of their edges. She notes the hyena track is fresh, probably less than 6 hours old. You stand up a little faster than necessary at that information. The hike continues, and the sorters teach you more of the land's subtle signs: wind direction, bird chatter, shifting sand textures. This isn't sightseeing, it's decoding. A skill passed down like inheritance. Your mind wanders as your feet move. You think of the settlement from last night, the market the day before, the resin trees at dawn, the scent that has become a quiet companion. Every step carries you deeper into a rhythm that feels strangely natural, even though your normal life is hundreds of miles away, built of screens and schedules. By mid-morning, the heat settles heavily on your shoulders, but a thin line of greenery appears ahead, a sign that water sits close to the surface. The camels perk up, ears flicking forward. The sorter's steps grow quicker. Even you feel a renewed energy. As you approach, The scent of fresh leaves mixes with the lingering aroma of frankincense rising from the bundles strapped to the camels. The two scents weave together, soft and grounding. Salma turns to you, wiping sweat from her brow. "We'll stop soon," she says. "There's a water place ahead." And as you crest the next rise, you see it, a cluster of palms, a scattering of huts, and the faint glimmer of a well cover. A place to rest, to drink, to breathe. You walk toward it with the caravan, the desert unfolding quietly around you. By the time you step into the edge of the settlement, the heat wraps itself around you like a giant, slightly disappointed cat, warm, heavy, and unwilling to let go. The camels sigh in unison, relieved to see shade. The sorters loosen their scarves, shake dust from their clothes, and begin guiding the caravan toward a cluster of clay-walled buildings near the water point. You follow, your legs pleasantly numb from the steady rhythm of walking. The scent of frankincense clings to the morning air as though refusing to be overshadowed by the earthy smell of wet rope and sun-warmed wood. This settlement isn't large, just a way station where caravans pause before continuing toward Berbera's sprawling port. But already you feel the shift. The quiet of the open desert gives way to the soft hum of human presence. Pots simmer. Goats bleat. Someone is loudly bargaining over a bundle of firewood with the enthusiasm of a game show contestant. Inside a shaded courtyard, the sorters finally unload their resin bundles, setting them down with the gentle pride of people placing a completed project on a teacher's desk. You watch as they unravel cloth coverings and inspect the grains. The light here is different, filtered through palm fronds, softened, a calm greenish gold. It makes the resin glow faintly, as if lit from within. A man named Zassan approaches, wiping his hands on his tunic. He's one of the settlement's buyers, a middle figure between collectors and the coastal exporters. His eyes gleam with the sharpness of someone who negotiates for a living. Yet when he kneels beside the pile of resin, he does so with surprising tenderness, like greeting an old friend. "So," he says to Warsame, "the mountains were good to you this season." Warsame shrugs modestly. "The trees decide. We just follow." A mainstream historical fact lands quietly in your mind as you observe them. Ports on the Gulf of Aden, including Berbera, were major trade hubs even in antiquity, funneling incense, spices, and textiles toward the Red Sea routes used by Roman, Arabian, and East African merchants. Standing here, you feel that continuity, the way a single grain of resin can connect distant worlds. Zassan pinches a piece of pale amber resin between his fingers, lifts it to his nose, and inhales. His expression remains inscrutable. "Good separation," he says. "Clear. Almost no bark." He glances at you as though to acknowledge that you, too, were part of this task. You straighten a little, trying not to look too proud. Next, he sifts the grains through his hands, letting them fall into a shallow wooden tray. The sound is soft, like rain on a tent roof. Each grain catches the filtered light, some shining nearly white, others glowing honeygold. The sorters gather around him, watching. Everyone knows this step matters. Buyers don't see the trees sway in the wind or the nights spent sorting by lamplight, they only see the final product. Ayon nudges you. "Watch his eyebrows," she whispers. "They tell the truth even when his mouth doesn't." Sure enough, Zassan's eyebrows twitch approvingly at the top-grade resin. But when he reaches the darker, irregular grains, they knit into the universal facial expression for, maybe. He scoops the batch into separate bowls, arranging them in order of quality. "These will go to the exporters tomorrow," he explains. "Ship leaves in 2 days. Big order from perfumers in France, I heard." Your mind briefly jumps to images of glossy perfume counters, glass bottles shaped like tiny sculptures, and glamorous advertisements featuring models who have definitely never sat next to a camel at dawn. Yet the resin glowing in these bowls is their hidden beginning, the quiet origin buried under polished branding. Sasan mentions that old port workers used to judge resin shipments by throwing a handful onto hot coals and seeing how long the smoke held a clean column. If the column wavered, they'd blame it on lazy sorters, a phrase that makes Warsame gasp dramatically in mock offense. "Lazy," he declares. "Do you know how many times I burned my fingers sorting by lantern last week?" "That was your fault," Ion adds. "You always hold the lantern too close." "Close enough to warm my tea," he counters. The light banter draws a few smiles from the onlookers. Third joke of the section: apparently lantern misuse is a national sport among resin workers. While the adults talk business, you drift toward the edge of the courtyard, where long wooden sieves lean against a wall. They are simple tools, flat frames with woven fiber grates, but they hold centuries of practice. You run your fingers across the mesh, feeling grains of old resin lodged in the fibers. Historians still argue whether certain sorting techniques used today directly descend from ancient South Arabian trade systems, or whether they evolved independently among Somali clans shaped by climate and culture. Looking at these sieves, handmade yet precise, you can believe either story. Soon, the buyer signals that he's satisfied enough to make an offer. Negotiations begin, dramatic and poetic in equal measure. Voices rise and fall. Numbers dance between hands. You hear phrases like "the desert's gift," "the tree's tears," and your thumb is pressing too hard on the scale. Honestly, you wish all business meetings had metaphorical accusations. Eventually, agreements are struck. Hands shake. Resin bowls are labeled with charcoal markings. The bundles destined for export are set aside on woven mats, awaiting their final journey to Berbera. As the sorters finish, you sense a subtle shift, a loosening of shoulders, a lightening of mood. The hardest work of this leg is done. Now there is only the coastal road ahead. Lunch arrives in the form of warm flatbread, spiced lentils, and goat stew that you politely accept while simultaneously praying you don't spill it on what might be your only clean shirt. Children run through the courtyard chasing each other, occasionally stopping to poke curiously at your boots. One small girl hands you a piece of resin as if offering treasure. You thank her, holding it up to the light. It shines like a miniature sun. When the time comes to move again, you join the sorters as they guide the now lighter caravan toward the track leading to Berbera. The wind carries the faint, salty tang of the coast. You can't see the port yet, but you can feel its presence, like a heartbeat hidden behind the dunes. The resin you sorted, the resin you carried, the resin that now sits marked and ready, it's heading for ships, markets, monasteries, perfumeries, and homes scattered across continents. And you're still walking with it, step by step. The road toward Berbera stretches ahead like a pale ribbon, drawn tight between dunes and thorny scrub. You feel the shift almost immediately, not in the landscape, which still holds that quiet, sun-bleached charm, but in the air itself. There's moisture in it now, the faintest hint of salt brushing your lips. The coast is calling, even if it's still hidden beyond the horizon. You walk beside the caravan, slower today, savoring the pace. The sorters seem lighter, too. The tough negotiations in the settlement are behind them, and the resin intended for export now travels with an almost ceremonial sense of purpose. Your camel companion plods alongside you with the resigned patience of an animal that has fully accepted your presence but still occasionally side-eyes you, just to maintain dominance. Somewhere behind you, Ion and Warsame are debating whether your camel likes you or merely tolerates you. Their conclusion leans heavily toward tolerates. First joke of the section: your camel has friend-zoned you. The path curves gently through a valley dotted with acacia trees, flat-topped silhouettes against the brightening sky. Resin droplets you sorted days ago still cling faintly to your fingers, their scent persistent despite repeated washes. You've come to like the way the aroma lingers, like a stubborn but pleasant memory. Salma walks ahead, humming a tune carried by generations of women who once walked these same routes, balancing resin baskets on their backs. She pauses, letting the group bunch up before pointing toward a cluster of hills. From there, she says, you'll see the sea. Just the idea makes your heart lift. After days of desert walking, the notion of a horizon made of water feels almost fictional, like something you'd swipe past on a screensaver. As the hours unfold, you fall back into an easy rhythm. Steps, breath, the swish of the camel's rope. Occasionally, the sorters stop to check the bundles, ensuring nothing rubs or loosens. Resin is tough, but the markets ahead demand perfection. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you walk. By the medieval period, Berbera's port was bustling enough that foreign travelers described it as a vital node in the incense, ivory, and textile trade. Ships from Arabia, Persia, India, and even China made port here, carrying goods that circled the world long before modern shipping lanes existed. And now, you're walking toward that same harbor, holding a tiny thread of that vast lineage. The landscape shifts subtly as you climb the final rise before the coastline. The air cools, brushing your cheeks. The light sharpens. The camels quicken their pace as though someone whispered the word water into their long, sensitive ears. Then you crest the hill, and there it is. The Gulf of Aden spreads before you, shimmering blue, rippling under sunlight, stretching until it kisses the distant skyline. The port city of Berbera sprawls along the coast with a chaotic charm, whitewashed homes, market stalls, wooden skiffs bobbing near shore, and massive cargo vessels anchored farther out. Smoke from cooking fires spirals lazily upward. Seabirds draw loops over the docks. You breathe in deeply, and the air tastes different, salted, textured, alive. Warsamade beams at your reaction. Not bad, eh? Just okay, you reply casually, pretending not to be awestruck. Second joke. Your attempt at playing cool fails spectacularly. The caravan winds through narrow streets where the smell of fish mingles with spices and the unmistakable sweetness of incense drifting from shop fronts. Merchants call out offers. Women sort fish by size on woven mats. Children dart between adults like caffeinated birds. The city hums with an energy you haven't felt in days, a kind of organized chaos that feels strangely comforting. The sorters lead you toward the warehouses near the docks. These buildings are long and airy, designed to withstand the sun. Workers bustle around carrying sacks, crates, ropes, and ledgers. Everywhere you look, there are signs of trade, weighing stations, inspection tables, towering stacks of crates labeled in multiple languages. Inside the largest warehouse, you watch as your group's resin is presented for its final evaluation. The exporter, a stern yet impeccably dressed woman named Amran, stands behind a low table. Her eyes are sharp, her movements crisp. When she lifts the first handful of resin, she does so with the solemnity of a jeweler examining diamonds. You did good separation, she says, glancing at Salma and Ayan. Very clear. This top grade is going to monasteries in Europe. Monasteries. You picture quiet stone halls, flickering candlelight, monks chanting while frankincense smoke curls toward vaulted ceilings. It's a far cry from sweating next to a camel, but somehow it fits. This resin belongs everywhere. Amran gestures to another batch. These, she says, go to perfumers. They'll extract the oil. Very fancy, very expensive. You imagine perfumers swirling tiny glass vials, describing notes like luminous warmth, desert sunlight, or the fragrance of ancient wisdom. If only they could see how unglamorous the sorting process gets when someone knocks over a tray at midnight. Third joke. You're convinced at least one luxury fragrance started in a very messy tent. Then Amran points to a darker batch. This grade goes to incense makers in temples across Asia. They blend it with sandalwood. As you listen, the resin you handled carefully with dusty fingers unfolds into a global journey. 3 continents, dozens of cultures, countless uses. Perfume. Ritual. Medicine. Memory. Amran mentions that some perfumers once claimed they could identify the exact harvesting region of a resin by scent alone, similar to how sommeliers brag about detecting hints of limestone soil. Warsame groans. Always the nose braggers, he mutters. The workers begin packaging the resin, sealing it in thick canvas sacks stamped with dates and source locations. You help tie a few knots, poorly, according to Ayon, who redoes them after you walk away. She pats your shoulder. Good enthusiasm, she says gently. Terrible knot. Historians still argue whether ancient Boswellia trade influenced early perfumery techniques in the Mediterranean, or whether those scent traditions evolved independently. Looking at the sacks destined for multiple continents, you suspect the answer is probably both. Influence travels like smoke, quiet, persistent, impossible to track perfectly. When the resin is finally loaded onto a small ferry that shuttles goods to the larger cargo ship offshore, you join the sorters near the pier's edge. The ocean wind ruffles your clothes and brings a cooling relief that feels almost unreal after days of dry heat. You watch the workers push the ferry from the dock, its hull slicing through the blue water. Resin, your resin, bumps gently inside the cargo hold. The ferry's weight glitters like scattered glass. This is the part one like best, Salma says softly. When the work becomes journey. You nod. You know exactly what she means. You stand beside the sorters, shoulders touching, as the ferry grows smaller. And in that moment, you feel connected, across time, across continents, across quiet choices and sandy miles, to a craft larger than any single person. You leave the bustle of Berbera behind with the reluctant sigh of someone parting from a good meal, satisfied, a little sleepy, but not quite ready to return to the quiet. The scent of the port still lingers in your clothes. Salt, diesel, fish, and, because resin seems to cling to you with the persistence of an over-enthusiastic sticker, frankincense. The sorters lead you inland again, though not far. Today's trek is slower, softer. The wind carries less heat, as if it, too, is recovering from the loudness of the docks. You walk past scrubby brush, pockets of green, and occasional patches of sandy earth where beetle tracks stitch tiny zigzags. Not so far now, Salma says, pointing toward a series of low hills. The conservation people camp there. You blink at her. Conservation people. She grins. Tree guardians. Scientists. Wanderers with notebooks. You'll see. Your camel makes a disgruntled noise, unimpressed by the idea of anyone protecting trees when snacks exist. First joke of the section. Your camel is firmly pro-snack, anti-policy. As you approach the hills, you notice something different in the Boswellia groves. These trees seem healthier, branches fuller, bark smoother, resin scars fewer and smaller. The air feels different too, rich with the faint sweetness of new growth. A tall woman steps out from behind a tree, wiping dust from the brim of her hat. She introduces herself as Dr. Layden, a conservation biologist who has spent years studying frankincense ecology. With her are a small team of researchers, each armed with tools ranging from handheld moisture meters to notebooks filled with alarming quantities of diagrams. "We've been waiting for you," she says warmly, though you sense she says this to anyone who arrives carrying resin dust. The group invites you to walk with them through the grove. They stop frequently, pointing to details you'd have overlooked: the curl of a leaf, the angle of a branch, the color of new bark. You realize quickly that while sorters know the trees intimately from the vantage of practice and heritage, these researchers know them in a different way, through data, patterns, and questions that never quite get settled. A mainstream historical fact surfaces as Dr. Leyden speaks. Ancient Greek and Roman writers noted that frankincense trees required careful tapping and long rest periods to stay productive. Even then, overharvesting was a concern. The more things change, the more people ignore instructions from 2,000 years ago. You stop beside a tree with several pale scars. Dr. Leyden gently touches one. This one was tapped too often, she explains. The tree can't heal quickly enough. Resin protects it from insects and disease. Without time to recover, she trails off, leaving the ending unspoken. She leads you deeper into the grove. Birds flit between branches. The wind whistles through leaves with a soothing rustle. Yet the researchers move with an undercurrent of urgency. "Come here," one calls, kneeling before a sapling secured by a mesh barrier. "Look at this little one." The sapling waves slightly in the breeze, its leaves vibrant and tender. You crouch beside it, feeling unexpectedly protective. Something so tiny has no business surviving in such a harsh environment, yet here it stands, rooted, determined. "This is part of our restoration project," the researcher explains. "We protect young trees from goats long enough for them to mature." You nod sympathetically. Goats are adorable menaces. Second joke. Goats are basically four-legged chainsaws with social anxiety. As you walk, the conversation shifts toward the future. Dr. Leyden explains how resin demand keeps rising. Perfume markets, essential oils, alternative medicine, spiritual use, and how that pressure falls heavily on the trees. Historians still argue whether previous incense booms led to actual declines in Boswellia forests or whether the groves naturally fluctuated due to climate cycles. But recent data suggests human demand is pushing the trees harder than ever. And unlike ancient times, today's harvesting happens faster, with shorter rest periods between cuts. You pause beneath a particularly old tree, its trunk thick, its branches wide like quiet arms around the sky. Salma places her hand on the bark. "My grandmother sorted resin from this grove," she says softly. "She always said the tree breathes slower than we do." A researcher nearby nods. She wasn't wrong. You listen as they describe the tapping cycle, each cut a wound, each drop of resin a bandage. Too many cuts weaken the tree's immune system. Some trees stop producing resin altogether. Others succumb to insects. A few simply wither. But we're learning, Dr. Leyden says. We're testing new methods, fewer cuts per season, rotating tapping zones, planting buffer groves to give older trees a chance to rest. You raise an eyebrow. Do they work? She hesitates. Sometimes. We're still figuring it out. The uncertainty lands heavy but honest. Your group pauses beside a grove where researchers have set up monitoring equipment, small sensors tied to branches, soil probes inserted near roots. Ion examines a piece of gear with fascination. "Fancy," she says. "We just look at the bark and smell the resin." Dr. Leyden laughs. "Your method works too. We're trying to learn from both." As the afternoon deepens, the conversation turns to the social side of conservation, how protecting the trees also protects local livelihoods. Without sustainable harvests, the next generation of sorters may have nothing left to sort. Warsame circles a tree, examining its branches. "We want these trees alive," he says. "We're not trying to eat tomorrow's work." The researchers nod. Collaboration isn't always easy, but everyone in the grove shares the same basic desire: keep the Boswellia alive. You follow the group to a shaded area where the sorters and scientists relax together, sharing snacks, dried fruit, peanuts, and flatbread. One researcher offers you a cup of tea brewed with a tiny pinch of frankincense. You take a sip, and the flavor surprises you. Soft, citrusy, almost floral. It's good for your throat, she explains. Old remedy. It's also slightly sticky, but you choose not to mention that. A researcher casually mentions that some early explorers believed frankincense trees cried at night, literal tears, because the resin glistened in moonlight. Some even tried to collect midnight resin, assuming it was more potent. Warsame snorts. If they saw our midnight sorting sessions, they'd know the only thing crying is us. As the sun begins to sink, you walk the grove one last time. The light glows golden through the branches. The air cools. Shadows stretch like long, lazy animals across the ground. One of the researchers adjusts a sensor, then smiles at you. You've learned a lot, she says. You're practically a tree guardian now. You laugh. Do tree guardians get badges? No, she replies, but they get resin under their nails. You look at your hands, she's right. The sorters gather their things, preparing to continue the journey. You take one last look at the saplings, at the ancient trees, at the careful balance of people working together. The desert, the grove, the science, the tradition, they're all threads in the same tapestry. And as you step away from the trees, you feel that connection lingering like a warm echo. Night approaches slowly, like a storyteller settling onto a cushion and clearing her throat. The heat loosens first, drifting upward until the air feels breathable again. Then the sky melts from bright blue into soft indigo, and the first stars prick through the thinning daylight. You walk with the sorters along a gentle ridge, the earth still warm under your soles but no longer biting hot. Ahead, you see a faint glow, warm, flickering, pulsing like a heartbeat. As you draw closer, the sound reaches you. Laughter, low voices, the soft rustle of resin being poured from one bowl into another. Tonight, the sorters are gathering for a special quiet ritual, a night sorting circle. It's less mystical than it sounds and more like a practical excuse to finish the day's work together while telling stories and roasting snacks over a small fire. But the atmosphere transforms the simple task into something almost ceremonial. Ion spots you and waves enthusiastically. You made it, she calls. Good. We need more hands. And maybe someone to keep Warsame awake. I am awake, Warsame protests, though the half-squint in his eyes betrays him. First joke of the section. Warsame and Gravity have been negotiating for hours, and Gravity is winning. The sorting circle sits on a small plateau framed by low boulders. A lantern glows at the center, joined by a tiny fire contained within a ring of stones. Its flames crackle softly, the warmth a gentle balance to the cooling desert air. Around it, bowls overflow with resin, some gleaming pale, others rich amber, still others grainy and dark with bark dust. You settle onto a woven mat beside Salma, who hands you a bowl and a flat wooden sorting stick. You've learned this dance well by now. Spread, sift, separate, breathe. But tonight, the rhythm is different, slower, more reflective. Above, the sky deepens into a vast tapestry of stars. You recognize a few constellations, though they seem brighter here, sharper, as if performing just for you. The Milky Way spills across the sky like powdered silver. You inhale the cool air, carrying scents of earth, resin, ash, and the faint sweetness of nearby trees. Listen, Salma says softly. You pause. There's silence, yes, but also not silence. The faint drone of night insects. The murmur of sorters debating grain quality. The fire crackling. A camel yawning somewhere deep in the dark. The desert has its own nighttime orchestra, quiet but full of life. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your thoughts as you sort. Ancient incense caravans often traveled at night through harsher regions, using starlight to guide them and stopping at oases for sorting tasks. Travelers described these moments as some of the most peaceful parts of their journey. Looking around this circle, you feel the echo of that old serenity. The sorters begin sharing stories, as they always do when night falls. But tonight's stories have a different flavor, layered with superstition, humor, and the kind of exaggeration only a warm fire encourages. Ayon starts. When I was little, she says, my aunt told me that if you sort resin under a full moon, the grains whisper the future. Warsame snorts. What future? They whisper that your fingers will hurt. No, Ayon insists, they whisper who will marry next. You hold up a resin grain toward the moon. Well, you ask. Do I hear anything? Yes, Warsame says solemnly. It says you should stop holding it like that. You're blocking the light. Second joke. Apparently your resin reading skills are non-existent. The circle erupts in laughter. As the laughter fades, Salma speaks up. My grandmother said the trees have spirits that wander at night. If you listen closely, you'll hear them checking on their resin. Trees don't walk, Warsame grumbles. Spirits walk, Salma corrects. Trees stay. Ayon adds, some people say the Boswellia spirits knock on tents when they are annoyed. I slept with earplugs for a week once. She shivers dramatically. You glance at the surrounding trees, their silhouettes swaying gently. They look innocent enough, but you still shift your mat slightly closer to the fire, just in case. Sorting continues. The grains trickle between your fingers like tiny gems, clinking softly as they fall into their respective bowls. The motions hypnotize you. Spread, sift, gather, inspect, place, spread again. The moon rises higher, bathing the circle in a gentle silver. The lantern's glow softens. Shadows stretch and sway with each shifting body. Salma leans closer. You've gotten better, she says. Your hand doesn't shake as much. Only when the camel screams, you reply. That is fair. A breeze glides through the plateau, lifting a swirl of resin dust into the air. Tiny particles glitter briefly in the moonlight. It's beautiful, like snow that forgot to be cold. Then one of the younger sorters, a boy named Saad, looks up from his bowl. Tell them the debate, he urges the group. Salma groans, covering her face. No, not again. Warsame grins, eyes sparkling. Historians still argue whether the earliest frankincense traders followed coast-first routes or inland mountain paths. But the real debate? Whether Ayon missorted an entire batch last year because she was trying to impress a visitor. Ayon gasps. It was dark. And he was very handsome. Third joke. Apparently resin and romance do not mix well. The circle laughs until someone nearly spills a bowl. As the hours drift, a calm settles over the group. The conversation softens into personal tales, childhood memories, lost relatives, small triumphs, little heartbreaks. You learn that Salma's favorite resin shape is the smooth teardrop grains. That Ayon once tried to train a goat to fetch firewood. That Warsame can whistle loudly enough to startle birds from trees, which he demonstrates, startling everyone instead. You share a story too, something small, slightly embarrassing, but warmly received. The desert seems to encourage honesty. Maybe it's the stars overhead, watching silently. Maybe it's the quiet work binding everyone together. Eventually, the resin piles shrink into neat, sorted bowls arranged around the fire. Each bowl glows faintly, catching the firelight like captured daylight. You admire the sight, a mosaic of golden hues, the result of hours of gentle hands and patient eyes. Salma stretches her back. We're almost done, she says. Good work, apprentice. Do I get a certificate? You ask hopefully. No, she says. But you get tea. You pretend to be disappointed, but the tea, warm, sweet, comforting, makes up for it. As the last grains are sorted, someone begins humming a soft tune. Others join. It's not quite a song, not quite a chant, just a simple melody that floats upward into the night. You add your voice too, quietly at first, then stronger. The desert listens. The fire crackles. The resin gleams. And for a moment, everything, the grove, the journey, the port, the trees, the stories, feels woven together, held gently in the hands of the night. When the sorting is finished, the sorters carefully cover the bowls with cloth, tuck tools into bags, and douse the fire. The lantern's glow dims. You rise with the others, feeling the weight of the day soften into a pleasant ache. The night stretches before you, quiet, calm, welcoming. And you walk with the group toward your sleeping mats, guided by moonlight and the soft crunch of sand beneath your feet. Sleep should be pulling you downward by now, but the night in the frankincense lands is never fully finished until one last, gentle ritual is observed. The sorters drift toward their sleeping mats scattered along the slope, and you follow, the sand cool beneath your feet, the moon washing everything in a soft milky glaze. You find your mat where you left it, tucked against a low boulder that acts as a windbreak, and you lower yourself carefully, the day's lingering resin dust crackling faintly against the fabric. The air is still warm enough that you don't need much cover, just a thin blanket, but the breeze carries that faint edge of desert chill that reminds you, things change quickly out here. During the ancient incense caravan days, here comes your mandatory historical fact. Travelers often slept beside their trade goods to keep them safe from wandering hands or curious animals. Some even tucked bowls of resin beside their heads, claiming the scent helped them dream clearly. You wonder whether that was practical caution or just the ancient world's version of aromatherapy marketing. Your own dreams haven't been particularly prophetic so far, but you'll take any excuse for a little extra comfort. You stretch out on your mat, hands folded behind your head, staring up at the sky. Stars blink lazily overhead, as if half asleep themselves. A faint ribbon of cloud drifts across the moon. Somewhere behind you, a camel sighs with the deep, theatrical weariness of an actor on their final curtain call. First joke of this section, because that camel has been angling for applause all day. You listen to the sorters settling in. Some whisper. Some murmur prayers. One person snores within 30 seconds, an impressive skill, honestly. The night begins to gather itself around all of you, soft and protective. Salma lowers herself onto the mat next to yours and says, "Don't sleep yet. There's something you need to learn before morning." You blink. Is it how to snore as loudly as Wasame? That, she says, is not a skill one learns. It is a curse. Second joke delivered, and Wasame groans in his sleep as if he somehow heard the insult. Salma shifts onto her side, propping her head on her hand. Tomorrow, you'll help pack the sorted resin for transport. But before you do, there's a lesson all sorters learn at night. Is it philosophical, you ask? Mystical? Involving sacred tree spirits who complain about noisy sleepers? Salma chuckles. Not mystical. Just quiet. Most people never think about it. But sorting, harvesting, carrying, all of it requires stillness. And stillness, she adds, is something you must practice. Ayon, curled a few mats away, whispers, "Teach them the stone trick." Not the stone trick. Wasame mumbles into his blanket, half asleep. They'll drop it on their foot. Salma ignores him and reaches into the pouch beside her. She pulls out a small, smooth stone, no larger than a date. She hands it to you. Close your eyes, she says. Hold the stone in your palm. And breathe. You raise an eyebrow but do as instructed. Your fingers curl around the cool surface. Your breathing slows. The night settles deeper. This stone, Salma says softly, is about patience. Sorters used to hold one before sorting began. They believed it absorbed nervous energy. That sounds like something sold in airport gift shops, you whisper. Salma nudges you. It doesn't matter whether it works. What matters is that it reminds you to focus. To be here. To feel the work, not just do it. You sit quietly with the stone. The silence grows comfortable around you. You can hear your own heartbeat again. The faint breeze brushes your cheek. Sand shifts under a distant footstep. Everything feels slowed, softened, expanded. Historians still argue whether this ritual came from ancient Somalia or from caravan elders further north, Salma says. But everyone agrees it made the nights nicer. You open your eyes. The moon seems brighter somehow, as if acknowledging your moment of calm. Or maybe you're just tired. Ayon sits up suddenly. Tell them about the night bells. No, Warsame says into his blanket. Please, no bells. Yes, bells, Ayon insists. She leans toward you conspiratorially. Sometimes, in the deep desert, when the wind blows from the right direction, people swear they hear faint chiming. Like faraway bells. Caravans, you guess. Maybe. Or maybe goats with too much personality. Or maybe, she adds dramatically, spirits checking the weight of the resin. You tilt your head, listening hard. All you hear is the breeze and Warsame's heroic snoring, which absolutely counts as a third joke. Salma smiles. Whether the bells exist or not isn't the point. What matters is that the desert is never silent. Even in stillness, there is sound. And even when you're alone, you're not. You let the idea settle into your mind. A thin cloud drifts past the moon again. A lone insect zips by, probably regretting its entire life's decisions. Someone shifts in their blanket. The stone in your hand warms slightly from your palm's heat. The sorters begin murmuring goodnights. The last lantern is extinguished. Darkness embraces the plateau, not frightening, but velvety and full of depth. You close your eyes. You inhale the familiar resin scent that has followed you throughout this journey. Sweet, earthy, comforting. The desert breathes with you, slow and steady. Tomorrow, you'll help pack the resin. Tomorrow, the grove and its people will prepare for another season, another harvest, another cycle of sorting and shipping and returning home again. And somewhere within that rhythm, you'll carry the quiet skill you've learned, the patience, the gentleness, the echo of the night sorting circle. But for now, night holds you. Night understands you. Night whispers that you belong here, even if only for a moment. Your breathing softens. Your thoughts loosen. The stone slips from your hand onto the mat with the faintest tap. You're just about gone. And the desert finally lets you sleep. The night deepens even further now, soft as unfurling silk, slower than the drifting sands that cradle your resting place. The stars above you seem to dim themselves just slightly, not out of weariness, but out of courtesy, as if they know your eyes are growing heavy and they don't want their brightness to pull you back from the warmth of sleep. The breeze, once playful, quiets into something gentler, brushing against your cheek like a tired friend tucking you in. Your muscles lengthen, loosen, and finally let go. The scent of frankincense, warm, familiar, comforting, spreads into the darkness like a slow inhale the desert takes on your behalf. You allow the last remnants of the day's noise to drift away, each thought thinning into something softer, something lighter, until they no longer feel like thoughts at all, just small movements in a dream already forming. Around you, The sorters lie in their own quiet spaces, their breathing steady, their presence soothing. The fire has long since faded, but a trace of its warmth lingers in the sand beneath you, seeping upward in a tender, steady pulse. Even the trees seem calmer now, their silhouettes still, their resin cooling in the moonlight. You let yourself sink, slowly, gently, into the rhythm of this place. A rhythm without urgency, without expectation, without the tugging weight of anything unfinished. Only rest, moving toward you across the desert like a soft tide returning to shore. And as you drift, your body lighter with each breath, your mind softer with each moment, the world around you fades into a comforting hush, leaving only the quiet glow of peace to hold you.